My name is Mac Haddo. I'm the Senior Fellow in Public Policy with the American Kratom Association. And joining me this evening is John Schinsholzer, who has been a long-term advocate for Kratom and its potential benefits for people that are in the addiction recovery area. But he's been, for a longer term than that, is a Marine. As we have talked about the importance of the stories that we hear constantly about veterans who are looking for alternatives in the treatment of acute and chronic pain associated with their service-related injuries or with PTSD and other kinds of struggles that our veterans have. Nothing made more sense than to focus on this area and to build out a Veterans for Safe Kratom program, which is the purpose that we have here tonight. But before we get started, obviously, every instance where we can recognize that people that are suffering, that we should certainly have our hearts and prayers go to them. And in the midst of these hurricanes and storms that are pummeling the Florida area and up into North Carolina, obviously there are a lot of our friends in the Kratom community, but there are a lot of people that are really in harm's way, and our thoughts and prayers go to them. And we certainly stand by, hopefully, to help as those in the Kratom community identify needs along the way. But certainly our prayers are with them. To start about the veterans program that we're about to embark on and announce here tonight, when we first got started in this battle on Kratom and the FDA's war on Kratom, I received a phone call from a wife of a service member, Michael Eatman, and she told me about her husband's journey, where because he was a SEAL Team 8 guy and had made enormous sacrifices for our country, and he got, because of service-related injuries, ended up in the VA system, and as many tragic stories as we hear, didn't respond to the kinds of treatments, and whether or not those treatment protocols actually serve the interest of these veterans is a real question. And it was at the point where he had simply lost his family. He had lost connections with all of his social network. The opioids that they were treating his pain with had debilitated him to the point that he lost his home, and he was lost in his life. And she said that Kratom actually saved him. And she talked about how his recovery and how Kratom had brought him back into society where they had met, where he had remarried her, and that they had built this life together. And she just wanted to say thank you to the American Kratom Association. And I thought, wow, what a powerful story. And I asked her if I could talk to her husband, Michael. And she said, well, he's not as confident about his ability to speak about these things as he used to be. But after some coaxing, he finally got on the phone with me, and he even did a video for us. And that's on our website. And if you haven't seen it, you should go and watch it, because it tells this fabulous story about an American hero who found his way back into society and into a productive life and into a whole life because of Kratom. And I think that as I have heard numerous stories of veterans along the way, to hear that replicated has been absolutely terrific, and is a testimony to what we should be doing when it comes to public policy. We know that Congressman Jack Bergman, who is a former lieutenant general in the Marine Corps and who is a co-sponsor of the Federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act, doesn't just do this as a public policy matter. You should read his letter that's up on our website that he sent to state and local officials, talking about how important it was to stand up and fight the FDA, because the FDA's position on Kratom is not justified in the science. It is a petty dispute that the FDA bureaucrats have had towards dietary supplements and botanical supplements for decades. They prosecute that war with disinformation, with trying to divert attention away from their failure to act. And Congressman Bergman is a warrior on these issues, and an inspiration, I think, to all of us that are in our foxholes fighting these battles as we go forward. But as we've thought about how do we capitalize on this experience that we have seen from so many of the Kratom community who themselves are veterans and who have found the benefits of Kratom to be not just life-saving, and that's important, but also getting them back into a normalcy of life and restoring their lives so that they can function at very high levels with their families and with their employment opportunities and in society. So that's what we want to get to. We want to celebrate that journey. And so we've asked John to take on the project of leading our Veterans for Kratom Safe program. And our goal here is to identify and recruit every veteran who has had this positive experience with Kratom and their family members to join us so that when we talk about public policy, that we're not just doing this sort of sanitized, this is the policy argument, but these legislators and these policymakers get to hear the real life stories about people whose lives have been improved or saved by Kratom. So that's the objective of this program. When we talked to John about it, we weren't certain exactly what his reaction would be. He leapt at the opportunity. His passion and enthusiasm came through the screen when we talked about it on a Zoom call. And he's here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to him, and then we're glad to answer any questions anyone has. We are live streaming this, and we're recording it. We'll be able to share it after this event is over. We want it to become the springboard and the catalyst for people to join, to recruit, to find people in their communities, their sphere of friends that are veterans who have benefited from the use of Kratom, so that we can translate that journey into a story that can be told persuasively to these public officials. I want to personally thank John for being willing to take this assignment. When we're out there and we're fighting these battles, John has been with me in many of these legislative hearings. He knows exactly what I'm talking about when you see these legislators' reactions and how they want to focus on some of the minutia, and they don't have the opportunity to see and to feel and to hear the stories of people whose lives have really been improved because of Kratom. So, John, thank you. And I'll turn it over to you, and then we can open up for any questions that anybody might have.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mac. Yes, I was so excited when you came up with this idea. And I don't know if it was the Marine in me, first to fight, never say no, volunteer for all the details, which I did have a reputation for that in the Corps. But, I'm just disgusted the way Kratom's been demonized, but especially the way they're handling our veterans. And I think AKA is on point. We have got to rally these veterans. We've got to get them on board, give them just, simple training, how to tell your story. Part of the first thing I told you and Mark when we came up with this idea, I said, man, we gotta get these veterans to send us in these 2-minute videos, tell us their Kratom story, because telling your story is powerful. And people don't like to say no to a veteran. Personally, and all the veterans I hope to enlist, we signed that blank check at one time that was up to and including our life. And if anybody in America, has the right to not only free press, freedom of speech, but to petition your government on silly things, it's these veterans. And I'm just excited, and I know it's going to be valuable and important, and I'm sure it's going to grow and do well. And I want to be part of it. And most of the people watching know my history with recovery. They know I've been in recovery over 42 years, but for the last 8 years, I've seen the value of Kratom with the addicted population, especially the veterans. And man, this Kratom should be the gold standard for not only recovery, but for so many other ailments. And to demonize a veteran who wants to consume Kratom, that's not acceptable, and that's not going to fly in my life, and it's not going to fly in AKs. So, the short version of why I'm here and what I'm doing is I'm passionate, I'm excited, I can't wait to see where this goes, and you know me, Mac, I can talk longer than you, but if we do have some questions, I'd love to hear them.
Well, and people, if they want to ask questions, you can go to the Q&A button, and I know someone's already asked a question.
Yeah, I saw Misty out there. The problem is veterans are afraid to speak out on fear of losing their benefits. I'm not so sure you can lose your disability benefits for consuming kratom, especially if it's federally legal, and in the state you're in if it's legal. So I think that's more of a stigma attachment than an actual reality. Now, I do know if you're on government assistance and if you're addicted to illegal drugs, then yes, you can have a problem there. But if you're not in a banned state, that's a battle we should be fighting right there. How dare they demonize and stigmatize people with benefits consuming responsibly, consuming kratom? That doesn't even make sense in my book.
Well, and I think Misty's right about the fact that that the military currently does not allow for an active duty military personnel to consume kratom,
That's
and
active duty.
right. But the Veterans Administration also does not allow. Now, whether it applies, as you say, to the continued benefits, we'll have to check into. But we are going to be before the Veterans Administration and the Department of Defense appealing their decision about kratom, because we know that the origination of that policy comes from the FDA. And I think anybody that takes a rational view of this understands that the FDA can do some good things, but they are wrong when it comes to kratom, just as they were wrong about dietary supplements and botanical supplements, which required the Congress to pass unanimously, which tells you how mad the Congress was, unanimously passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in 1994. And it was because the FDA just went too far, they got extreme, and the FDA, because they were claiming that dietary supplements were killing people, that there were all these serious adverse events from dietary supplements, and Congress had to stop them and create a framework for regulating dietary supplements. And that's true for kratom today. But the VA and the Department of Defense should not be duped, particularly when you've got all this new evidence that's emerging, both in terms of NIDA-funded studies and the FDA's own studies, which show the kratom is well tolerated at all dose levels. And to the extent that the military or the veterans believe that the readiness of the forces that they obviously have to rely on are somehow going to be impaired by the consumption of kratom is nonsense. So we're going to be fighting that battle, and I think it'll be one of the key objectives of the Veterans for Safe Kratom program that we take on the VA and push hard, because I know that one of the stigmas and the fears that veterans might have is exactly this issue, and we'll find out what the policy is. We'll get Congressman Bergman to ask the VA, is any veteran going to potentially lose their benefits if they acknowledge they use kratom? Let's find out, and we'll be able to inform the veteran population in the kratom community.
Well, we do. Misty keeps bringing the point up about the fear, the stigma, but it's true. You have active duty military, you have retired military with benefits, you have those in the VA system, but the majority of veterans aren't married to any of those things. They're just, they did it 4 years, they're out, they're 50 years old, 40 years old. So that those veterans is a good starting point. Let's try to lasso those veterans, and then maybe we could, give some thought to how we get some anonymous testimonies from some of these people who live in fear. That can be done too. So, man, I'm already thinking how to tackle each one of these problems. So I'm gonna be awake all night with solutions. I'll have about tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and the follow on from Misty is that some of them worry about their government jobs too, that maybe they've retired from the military, they're out in the government. Obviously, we need to address this in terms of the internal policies. We'll get more information about this. It's a great launching point for us to be able to get good information out to obviously inform the kratom consumer population on these issues, and we'll do that. I see that Forgotten Not Gone, our good friends out in Las Vegas, ask about the updates on daily dose or amount to take on this. Now, this is a great topic because the standard for the consumption of kratom really relies upon two things. One is the manufacturer has to have a good faith basis on the safety of their product. Now, that means that it has to be safely formulated. They have to be able to demonstrate that they have got a kratom product that is not going to be per se dangerous because its formulation is too concentrated, or the formulation is combined with other products non-kratom products or ingredients that are psychoactive substances that need to be reconciled with good science. So we need to find out the truth of that. And the second component of that requirement federally for the introduction of a product into the marketplace requires under the conditions of use. So that's where labeling comes in. And the very point that we're hearing from our friends from Forgotten Not Gone is, what is the safe dose of kratom? So we know a little bit about this in terms of science that has been done, and enough science has been done to demonstrate the following. When you take a kratom product and it's pure leaf or powdered product, the worst thing you can do to yourself is make yourself sick, because metrogenine, the main component of kratom, has a ceiling effect. It doesn't give you any greater effect. And if you keep taking it because maybe you think you're going to get an enhanced effect, or because you have an addiction personality, you're going to make yourself sick and you're going to toss your cookies. That's it. Now, for extract products that are concentrated, this dose level is very important, both in terms of what you should take in the initial dose and the number of serving sizes you should take in a day. That has to be on the label, because extracted products have taken out all of the microbial load, and they've allowed only metrogenine. And if it's metrogenine only, then follow the directions on the label, because those companies simply have an obligation and responsibility to label it appropriately. If you have a kratom product that does not say what your serving size should be, either on an individual serving or for an amount to be consumed in a day, toss it, throw it away, get rid of it, and don't purchase it again. This is the ridiculous situation we're in the United States because of the FDA, and it just came up this past week in Florida. I'm sorry, in Ohio. The Ohio Department of Agriculture has informed 2 retailers that they are not allowed to sell kratom if it's in a form that is obviously intended for human consumption. And they cite the FDA's position on their FDA and kratom website, a website that did not have the benefit of rulemaking as required by the Administrative Procedures Act. And so therefore, the state of Ohio has no basis, none, to rely upon that statement as a public policy. And yet they're doing it. But the really, really interesting thing that they did is they said, you can sell powder, but it can't have any label on it. If you have a label that says you should take 2 grams of this, as soon as you say that, then it's banned, because then it's obvious for human consumption. The idea that the Ohio Department of Agriculture would advocate for selling a kratom powdered product without any directions for use is insane. And yet that's what they're doing. So obviously the FDA is working hard to advance their war on kratom. They're working hard to do a shadow ban on kratom that they cannot justify under the science that's required by the Controlled Substances Act. So we're in this battle, and that's why this program is going to be so doggone important as we go forward on this. And it's just one of those things. So Kenneth asked me to elaborate on the ceiling effect of just the powder. These are the results of research that's been done at the University of Florida and some other studies, that when you look at how much you can take and what its effects will be, and they found that no matter how much you take, the ultimate outcome is you're going to be sick. Now, there is a rat study that was done to determine the safety of kratom products, and they used what's called the FDA oxycodone protocol. This is a published protocol for safety studies to be conducted of any substance, and they match it against oxycodone, because the FDA knows the dose level that produces an effect of oxycodone. And so by measuring it, apples to apples, they know exactly what the safety of the substance you're testing is. So the researchers wanted to make sure that this was going to be bulletproof. So they went to the FDA and said, we have your published protocol. Tell us what we should do in order to make sure that you, the FDA, will agree that when we get these results, that they're reliable. And so the FDA even gave them some specific advice about that particular protocol. They started the study. The first tranche of oxycodone, which was specified in the protocol, matched against the metrogenine levels. The head researcher came back to the scientific team and said, I'm seeing nothing, no response whatever from the metrogenine. The predictable effect of the first tranche of the oxycodone did what it was expected. That was an important finding because there was no safety risk, none at that first level. Second level, he said, I know that it's outside of the protocol, but it's within the spirit of the protocol in that I'm recommending we increase the dose. Let's see if we can get something that's higher dose of metrogene, because I can tell you'll get nothing on the second tranche here as well. So they dramatically increased the metrogene levels in the second dose, and the head researcher came back and said, I'm still seeing nothing. He said, this is a waste of your money and your time. Metrogene is not going to produce a safety effect that's in trouble. He said, so I recommend that you let me, the head scientist, put as much metrogene into a soluble solution as I can get to inject into the test animals. So they injected a metrogene dose level at 400 times what any human could consume in a day. And what they saw in the animals, the expected oxycodone test animals died or had serious adverse events, and they got sedation only at 400 times. So that's why the basis for this is, as hard as they tried, they couldn't kill the test animals with metrogene. And that's a pretty good, a benchmark for safety. Now you compare that to what happened with the FDA's dose finding study that they announced in February. They started at 1 gram and they escalated the dose. They even skipped a couple of grams when they saw that they were getting no adverse events that were reported. The clinicians working on that study expected, based on conversations they had with the FDA scientists, that they would start to see serious adverse events that would occur at above the 6 gram level. So the protocol is that they had 40 people in each cohort, 5 cohorts. They had 8 people that were on the Kratom, and they had 2 placebo. They started escalating the dose, and they saw that there was no effects until they got to 12 grams. 12 grams in a 5-minute period. You had to ingest it as quickly as possible in order to get it down. They saw the only non-serious adverse event experienced by the Kratom cohort and the placebos was nausea. Ingesting that much plant material in a 5-minute period was going to create nausea. So that's why the safety protocol is pretty well established. And the finding of the FDA dose finding study is that Kratom appears to be well tolerated at all dose levels. Now, the plaintiff's attorneys and the anti-Kratom people are trying to say, oh, that doesn't mean anything because that's such a small study. It is a significant finding because the only way that the FDA could proceed with a human abuse potential study, which they are now doing, a 3-year study to look at the addiction liability of Kratom, is if they could demonstrate it could be safely administered to humans. And they would not have proceeded with that human abuse potential study, but for the finding that Kratom can be safely administered to human beings. And that is a significant finding. Now, you couple that with human clinical trials that have been done, which the FDA is aware of, which they've had the data submitted to them, which they've had the opportunity to evaluate, but the FDA refuses to officially recognize those studies as of yet. So there's a great story to be told here to public policy officials that Kratom really is safe. What we have to watch for are combinations where somebody tinkers with the allocation, and we have in our Kratom Consumer Protection Acts a limit on 7-hydroxymetrogene, which cannot exceed more than 2% of the overall fraction of the alkaloids in the plant. That's a safety standard, which was signed off on by Chris McCurdy. We signed an agreement, as many of you may know, with the Heart Group, which oversees the 7-OH manufacturers, and they agreed that they will no longer call 7-OH products Kratom, and any that do should be deemed illegal and taken off the marketplace. We thought that was a great first step, and obviously now we've got to look at the science, and they have to justify their market entry on this. But this is a significant part of the evaluation that we're making about the safety of Kratom materials, and this test was very important. And Misty makes the point, we don't know if it's a plant material or the gelatin capsules. We don't know. True, we don't know. Pretty good idea that it was the plant material that upset them, because it was the time period in 5 minutes. It would cause nausea. And the key part is it was both the placebos and the Kratom subjects. So I think that was an important study. And I think the collateral studies that are available and done that the FDA knows about, just hasn't publicly recognized, also prove that point.
Well, I noticed Jeff had a question out there about FDA and maybe they taking money or whatever. But Jeff, the bottom line is Kratom bumps up against the Suboxone industry, the methadone industry. That's been they pimping that out as the gold standard for recovery. And here comes a plant product that you can pretty much buy anywhere, takes away the need for these pharmaceuticals and these doctors. So I really think they just circling the wagons to protect an existing industry, and they're doing it at the expense of us, the consumers, and the people it's helping. And that's where the problem lies. In America, we should have the freedom to choose products. Real simple stuff. And it's something, if it's safe and available, how dare them demonize it and then ban it or schedule it unnecessary. So I think it's a combination of things, but maybe Mac knows more about the inner workings of the FDA.
Yeah, well, it is unknown whether or not there's a money influence because we know that there are pharmaceutical companies that market painkillers that would view Kratom as a direct competitor. No question about that. And whether or not some FDA official out there is sympathetic with them or looking to land after they leave the FDA at some place and like that and wants to curry favor with them, who knows? That's been known to happen at the FDA, and that's unfortunate when it does. I think the more specific thing that is a problem, and it does relate to money, is that the FDA has this bias against dietary supplements. And the one thing that's true about dietary supplement regulation in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act is that they do not have user fees associated with dietary supplements. There are user fees that are applied to new drug applications. So when a big pharma company comes in and says, I want to have this evaluated, it triggers a 5 to 10 year evaluation by the FDA with a lot of associated clinical trials costing billions of dollars. So the economic threshold to get in, but the FDA went to the Congress 2 decades ago and said, we can't keep up with this, with the allocation of funding that you're providing to us. So they begged the Congress to authorize these pharmaceutical companies to provide user fees, which the Congress did. It was intended at the outset that would account for about 5 to 10% of the total overall budget of the Drug Evaluation Division of the FDA. Today, it's over 70% of the money comes from the new drug applications. So there is a resentment at the FDA that the dietary supplement industry gets off the hook. I've heard FDA officials describe it that way. They get off the hook. But you know what? The dietary supplement regulations do not require the intensity of review by the FDA. They're, in fact, as Dr. Califf appropriately said in Congress about 2 months ago, the FDA is the police to look at complaints that are filed with respect to dietary supplements. That's their job. And so they don't have that same requirement, but I think there's a couple of FDA people in their policy division that are looking for a payday to get the money from the industry with user fees, and that's part of the calculation. I think that is the bias against Kratom. But even if we didn't have that, even if there wasn't that influence, I'm convinced that the overwhelming bias of a small group of people that sit in the commissioner's office in very high-ranking senior positions at the FDA have determined that Kratom is a dangerous product. Now, they didn't have the guts to go, when ordered by a federal judge in the Southern District of California, to testify in the Guthrie case, when the judge said, I want the FDA with expert witnesses and documentation to show me why they claim that Kratom is dangerous. And the FDA refused. And on the record, the U.S. attorney communicated to the judge, and it's in the court record, she explained that the FDA refused to testify because the FDA, have not yet determined that Kratom is dangerous. Great. So has anybody seen a withdrawal of the statements on the FDA website referencing Factor 6 of their 2016 recommendation for scheduling, which is on their website? Factor 6 says that Kratom poses an imminent hazard to the safety of the American people. Why hasn't the FDA disclaimed that if they haven't yet determined that it's dangerous? Why hasn't the FDA removed the language in the FDA and Kratom website today, which says that Kratom poses a threat to the American public, and it should not be marketed as a dietary supplement, dietary ingredient. And they go on the list of all product formulations that they can legitimately fit under their umbrella of regulations to try to shadow ban Kratom. The FDA speaks, as the judge properly said, they don't speak with one voice. And you've got NIDA and DEA saying that, right now there is not legitimate basis for anyone to claim that Kratom should be scheduled. They say it. And yet the FDA is out there saying, oh, it should be scheduled. And they do it with their de facto shadow bans, with import alerts and their language on their website, jawboning people into a position about it being anti-Kratom. So big challenge for us. And that is why we see what Ohio is doing, because they cite in the emails between the Department of Agriculture in Ohio and these vendors, the FDA website. They're obviously doing that. We just got news today that New Mexico Department of Health in Albuquerque is doing the same thing. So obviously the FDA is escalating their effort at the local level to try to do what they can't do at the federal level. And they can't convince states anymore. After they dupe 6 states into it, they can't do it in the states anymore. So they're opening a new battleground. And that's why this effort is so important. We need veterans. We need veterans that are in this battle right now, standing up at state and local governments, telling these local government officials that what the FDA is saying is wrong. And we've simply got to do that.
Absolutely. I always heard if we're not at that table helping shape policy, then we're going to be on the menu. And I'd be damned if I want to be eaten by a politician. So we better get at that table and start advocating.
And John, nobody I want next to me when we have that battle than you. And that's why this program is so important.
Good. Well, I'm excited, man. I'm really looking forward to putting the old bootstraps on and getting cracking. So let's get in the fight.
Well, good. Let's, I don't see any new questions here. So let's say thank you to everyone that joined us. We appreciate it. I think our next steps, and we ask everyone to stand by, is that we're going to be doing outreach to identify those veterans, and we'll allow for them to remain anonymous, but be participants in this program. We'll take on the challenge of identifying what the policy issue is and the risk the veterans might have with the current VA benefits that they have. Hopefully there's none, but we'll verify that and be able to reassure people. And we'll be back here giving additional information. We're going to need everyone in the Kratom community in their families and in their circle of Kratom advocates to identify these veterans and help us recruit them in order to step up. Nothing is more important than voices that are testifying at these hearings, and the unique voices of the veterans who can speak to this are dramatically more powerful even than some of the average testimonies that we receive. All are important, but the veterans have a special place in the heart of these politicians. So we need to take advantage of that. They're the goats, and we want the goats to be there when we're telling our story. And John, you know what goat is? It's greatest of all time.
That's right. Yeah, they call me that all the time, man. Yeah.
Okay. I agree.
There's always the newcomers that say that.
There you go. There you go. So thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it. Reach out to us. We're ready to go to battle here. And John leading us is going to be a tremendous asset here at the American Kratom Association. We thank every one of the advocates that have joined us here tonight. So thank you.
Hoorah.